The coffee was cold again, same as it had been for the last 14 hours. The control room of the Nautilus II hummed with its usual low thrum. The sound of deep-sea exploration, of machines pushing against the crushing dark. Outside the thick portholes, only blackness. Inside, the air smelled faintly of stale coffee, sweat, and the sharp tang of ozone from overworked electronics. The crew moved with the quiet efficiency of people who'd done this 100 times before. Checking sonar returns, monitoring pressure gauges, making sure the miles of cable feeding the deep-sea drone stayed taut. Routine, boring, even. Just another day mapping the bottom of the world, the Mariana Trench's deepest point, Challenger Deep. Then the main sonar screen flickered. Not a glitch. A solid, impossible shape. Dr. Eris Thorne, the lead scientist, rubbed his gritty eyes. He'd been staring at screens so long, his vision blurred. But this was sharp. Too sharp. A perfect, smooth shape. Over a kilometer long, shaped like a teardrop resting on the seabed. No jagged edges, no vents, no sign of movement. Just nestled in the silt like a forgotten pearl. Run a passive sweep again, Thorne said, his voice raspy. It wasn't loud, but the room went quiet. Everyone heard the tightness in it. The technician tapped controls. The Nautilus II's passive sensors, the ones designed to listen without making a sound, to pick up the faintest whisper of a submarine engine or thermal leak, scanned the area. Silence. Complete, utter silence. No heat bloom, no engine rumble, not even the faintest electronic hum. It was like the shape wasn't just hidden, it was absent, like trying to hear a stone. Impossible, muttered the sonar operator. A woman with tired eyes and fingers stained with coffee. That depth? That pressure? Nothing sits that quiet. Not even our best stealth subs make zero noise down here. The water itself makes noise. Thorne leaned closer, his breath fogging the screen slightly. Active ping. Low power. Let's see what bounces back. The Nautilus II sent out a pulse of sound, a gentle ping into the abyss. It should have bounced off the seabed, maybe off a rock formation. Instead, it hit the teardrop shape and vanished. Not reflected, not absorbed with a muffled thud. Gone, like throwing a pebble into a bottomless well and hearing nothing. The return signal was clean, unnaturally clean, showing only the smooth, featureless outline. It was as if the shape wasn't just ignoring the sound, it was erasing it. A cold prickle started at the base of Thorne's neck. This wasn't a seamount. Seamounts were rough, volcanic, noisy with geological activity. This was manufactured, perfectly smooth, utterly silent. His mind scrambled for explanations. A glitch? A massive, perfectly formed iceberg that somehow sank? But ice wouldn't survive these pressures. It would shatter. A secret military project? Maybe. But why here? And why so clean? Send down the Abyssal Eye, Thorne ordered, naming their most advanced deep-sea drone. Full visual. Get close. Very close. The drone, a tough little machine with bright lights and high-def cameras, descended on its cable. The crew watched the live feed on another screen. The familiar, murky view of the trench floor, sediment kicking up in the drone's lights. It approached the shape. The smooth curve of the hull came into view, stretching impossibly far in both directions. It wasn't metal, not as anyone knew it. It looked dark. Not black, but a lack of light, like a hole punched in reality itself. The drone's powerful beams hit it, and simply stopped. No reflection. No glare. Just swallowed by the surface. Touch it, Thorne whispered, the request feeling foolish even as he said it. Gently. The drone extended its manipulator arm, the delicate claw reaching out. It moved closer, closer, until the tip was mere inches from the dark surface. Then it stopped, not crashed, not deflected, just frozen, absolutely motionless, like time had hit a wall right at that point. The arm didn't vibrate. It didn't drift. It was utterly, unnaturally still. The drone's systems reported normal function, yet the arm refused to move forward or back. Silence filled the control room, thick and heavy. The usual background chatter of the ship vanished. People stopped breathing. They stared at the frozen claw on the screen, inches from the impossible object. Someone dropped a stylus. The clack on the metal floor was shockingly loud. Thorne's hands were cold. He felt a dryness in his throat. This wasn't just unknown. This felt wrong, like seeing a ghost, but a ghost made of physics itself breaking down. He forced himself to think like a scientist. Check gravimetric sensors. Now. Triple check. The gravimetric array was their most sensitive tool for measuring mass and density. It didn't rely on light or sound. It felt the subtle pull of gravity. If this thing had mass, the sensors would know. The technician worked quickly, her face pale in the screen glow. She pulled up the data. Her eyes widened. She checked again. Then, looked at Thorne. Her expression a mix of disbelief and dawning horror. It shows mass, she said, her voice barely audible. A huge mass. Like a small mountain. Dense. Really, really dense. Thorne frowned. Okay. Heavy object. Makes sense for something that size, sitting on the seabed. The technician shook her head, her knuckles white on the console. No. That's not it. The volume. The size we're seeing on sonar. The mass it's showing? It shouldn't be possible, not by a long shot. This density, it should be collapsing in on itself, crushing itself into a tiny, super-dense ball, like the core of a dead star. But, look, she pointed to another readout. The gravitational pull on the surrounding water? It's zero. Nada. Like it has no mass at all. Thorne stared. His scientific mind, trained for decades to understand the universe through measurable forces, hit a brick wall. An object with the mass of a mountain, dense enough to theoretically create a black hole, yet exerting no gravitational pull? That wasn't just hidden technology. That violated the most fundamental rules of how the universe worked. Gravity was mass. Mass was gravity. You couldn't have one without the other. It was like saying something was wet, but had no water. He looked back at the main screen. The frozen drone arm. The silent, dark shape. The impossible sensor readings. The cold prickle on his neck spread. This wasn't a rock. This wasn't a submarine. This wasn't even something from a rival nation's black projects. This felt alien. Not necessarily from another planet, but alien to the very laws they relied on. It was as if the object existed just outside the edges of reality, as they understood it. He thought of the coffee, cold in its mug. He thought of the long, boring shift they'd expected. He thought of the quiet hum of the ship, now feeling fragile, like a toy boat on a vast, uncaring ocean. The crushing pressure outside the hull, usually just a number on a gauge, suddenly felt personal, threatening. Because whatever was down there, resting silently on the seabed, wasn't crushed by it. It ignored it. It ignored everything. A young technician, barely out of training, finally broke the silence, his voice trembling. "Dr. Thorne? What is it?" Thorne didn't have an answer. He looked at the impossible readings, the frozen drone, the perfect, silent shape on the screen. The only word that came to him, the only thing that felt true in that moment of utter scientific bewilderment, was a name he whispered to himself, a name that felt both ridiculous and terrifyingly apt. Achilles, the heel, the one point of vulnerability. But this felt like the opposite. This felt like something so far beyond them, so fundamentally other, that their entire understanding of physics, of reality itself, was the vulnerable heel. The name stuck in his mind. Cold and heavy. Project Achilles. Not a shield. A warning. And 317 rife. With Crossden and 7. He took a slow breath, the air suddenly thin in the control room. The routine mapping mission was over. They hadn't found a new geological feature. They'd stumbled onto something that made the known world feel small, fragile, and desperately, terrifyingly incomplete. The silence from the abyss wasn't just the absence of sound anymore. It was the silence of a universe holding its breath, waiting to see if these tiny humans would understand the message they'd just received. You don't know nearly enough. The cold coffee sat forgotten. The real chill was inside them now, spreading from the pit of their stomachs. The deep sea had just gotten infinitely deeper and infinitely more dangerous, not because of pressure or darkness, but because of the impossible thing resting silently on the bottom, defying everything they thought they knew. The workday was over. The real confusion, the real fear, had just begun, and no one had any idea what to do next. The coffee tasted like burnt cardboard, but nobody cared. The Nautilus, too, felt like a tin can, floating on an ocean of panic. After the frozen drone arm, the impossible sonar return, the gravimetric readings that made no sense. Everyone knew this wasn't just another deep-sea discovery. This was something that didn't belong. The air crackled with a tension that had nothing to do with the pressure outside the hull. People moved quietly, eyes darting to the main screen where the silent, dark shape still sat on the trench floor, looking utterly unbothered by the tiny humans staring at it from miles above. Then the lights on the horizon changed. Not sunrise. It was perpetually dark down here. But the harsh, artificial glare of spotlights, cutting through the black water, a cluster of submersibles, bigger and bulkier than the Nautilus II's little drone, approached. The UN had sent help. Or maybe just more witnesses. A multinational science team, hastily pulled from labs and universities worldwide, was descending to the new deep-sea lab they'd nicknamed Abyss Station, parked awkwardly near the anomaly. Everyone on the Nautilus II watched the live feed, holding their breath. What would these experts see? What would they do? The lead scientist from the new team, a woman with sharp eyes and a tired face who'd spent her career studying gravity's quirks, immediately zeroed in on the gravimetric data. Her name wasn't important right then. What mattered was the color draining from her face as she double-checked the numbers. She turned to the Nautilus II's crew over the comms, her voice tight. "You're right. It's like the numbers are lying. Mass like a mountain. But zero gravity pull? That's not just hidden tech. That's like saying fire is cold. It breaks the rulebook." She ran her hands through her hair, a gesture of pure frustration. "We need to touch it. Properly." They sent down a tougher probe, built like a deep-sea tank, heavy-duty manipulator arms, reinforced sensors, everything designed to withstand the crushing depths. The crew watched the feed as it descended, the powerful lights illuminating swirling silt. It got closer to the dark shape, the smooth, light-swallowing hull filling the screen. The operator guided a thick claw towards the surface, moving slowly, deliberately, inches away. Then, nothing. The claw just stopped, not hitting anything, not bouncing back, just frozen solid in mid-water, like it had hit an invisible wall made of pure stillness. The probe's instruments screamed normal operation, yet the arm refused to budge an atom. They tried reversing thrust. The probe itself drifted slightly away, but the claw stayed locked in place, perfectly motionless against the void-like surface. Try just shining a light on it," someone suggested, their voice hoarse. They activated the probe's strongest spotlight, a beam bright enough to cut through the deepest gloom. The light hit the hull and vanished. Not reflected, not dimmed, gone, like the light had been switched off the moment it touched the surface. The area where the beam should have been was just darker, a patch of pure, absolute nothing. It wasn't black paint. It was the absence of light itself. One scientist muttered, "It's not hiding. It's deleting the light." They tried everything. Laser rangefinders? The beam disappeared, no return signal. Spectrometers trying to analyze reflected light? Nothing to analyze. Thermal cameras? Registered absolute zero. But not the cold of space. It was like the concept of temperature didn't apply there. Particle detectors looking for stray atoms or radiation? Silent. Utterly silent. It was as if the probe, the light, the very space near the hull, had been erased from the universe's ability to be measured. The only thing that did register consistently was that impossible mass reading. A mountain crammed into a teardrop shape, with no gravity. It made zero sense. None. The scientists on the comm started talking over each other, voices rising with a mix of awe and sheer panic. "It's not stealth." The Russian physicist, a man known for his calm, kept repeating, his voice trembling slightly. "Stealth. Hides. This is unmeasurable. It's like trying to weigh smoke with a scale made of water. The tools don't work because the rules don't apply here." Then came the moment that truly broke them. They sent down a tiny, disposable sensor pod. No moving parts. Just a simple box packed with every kind of detector they had. Magnetic, electrical, gravitational, even ones looking for quantum fluctuations. It was designed to get as close as possible and just record. They watched the live data feed as it drifted towards the hull. Everything normal. Normal, normal. Then, within a foot of the surface, the data stream didn't spike or crash. It just flatlined. Completely dead. Not malfunctioning. Silent. Like the pod had ceased to exist as a thing that could be measured. They sent another. Same result. Closer this time. Dead feed. Again. And again. The silence in the Nautilus 2 control room was suffocating. You could hear someone's watch ticking. Someone else was chewing their lip raw. A young tech stared at the dead sensor feeds, tears welling up not from sadness, but from the sheer, mind-bending frustration of it all. Her entire education, years of studying physics, felt like a child's storybook suddenly. The universe wasn't playing by the rules she knew. It wasn't even using the same rulebook. The lead scientist from the new team, the one who'd looked at the gravity numbers, finally spoke. Her voice barely a whisper over the comms, but it echoed in the silent room. "It's not broken," she said, sounding utterly exhausted. Our physics, it's too small. It's like we're ants trying to understand a jet engine by feeling the vibrations on the runway. This thing, it exists in a place our science hasn't even dreamed of yet." She paused, swallowing hard. I think it's quantum locked." The term hung in the air. Quantum physics was weird, sure. Particles in two places at once. Spooky action at a distance. But quantum locked? That sounded like science fiction. She explained, her voice gaining a little strength as she grasped at the only theory that fit the impossible data. Imagine the entire ship isn't just made of atoms. Imagine it's frozen in a single, perfect quantum state, like Schrödinger's cat. But instead of the cat being both dead and alive, the whole ship is locked in one state where it doesn't interact with the normal world at all. Not light, not sound, not gravity, Nothing. It's not invisible. It's outside the game. Our sensors can't touch it because they operate on rules the ship has simply stepped away from. The implications hit them like a physical blow. If she was right, this wasn't just advanced technology. It was technology operating on principles humanity hadn't even theorized yet. It wasn't bending the rules. It existed in a reality where those rules didn't govern it. The warship part of the title they'd jokingly given it, Project Achilles, suddenly felt terrifyingly real, but not in the way they'd imagined. This wasn't a weapon you aimed. Its very existence was the weapon against understanding. Panic, cold and sharp, started to edge out the scientific curiosity. What if it reacted? What if getting too close broke something? The frozen drone arm, the dead sensor pods, were they destroyed? Or were they somehow trapped in that same impossible state? The thought of a human being frozen like that, not dead but utterly disconnected from reality, sent shivers down spines. Someone muttered, "It's not sleeping. It's waiting." And we're poking it with a stick. The UN liaison on the comms tried to sound calm, issuing protocols. Maintain distance. No further probes. Await further instructions. But his voice lacked conviction. Instructions from who? The world's top physicists were gathered here, and they were stumped. They were like cavemen staring at a smartphone, utterly incapable of comprehending what they were seeing. The usual scientific process. Observe, hypothesize, test, was useless here. Testing broke the tools. Observation seemed to be the problem. Someone on the Nautilus 2 crew finally voiced the fear gnawing at everyone. What if it is alien? Not from another planet, but from another physics. The idea wasn't laughed at. It felt horribly plausible. The silent shape on the screen wasn't just a mystery. It was a mirror showing how small and ignorant humanity really was. The deep ocean, once the last great frontier on Earth, suddenly felt like the edge of a much, much larger and stranger universe. The crushing pressure outside the ship's hull, usually just a number to monitor, now felt symbolic. Humanity was being crushed by the weight of its own ignorance. The lead scientist from the new team slumped in her chair near the Abyss Station console, staring at the dead sensor readouts. She looked utterly defeated, not by the object, but by the realization that her life's work, the foundation of modern physics, was suddenly as relevant as counting stars with the naked eye. "We came to map the bottom of the ocean," she said quietly, more to herself than anyone. "And we found the bottom of everything." She rubbed her temples. How do you study something that refuses to be studied? How do you even ask it a question? The coffee was forgotten. The routine of deep-sea exploration was a distant memory. They were trespassers in a realm they weren't meant to see, staring at a silent monument to the limits of human understanding. The dark shape on the screen wasn't just sitting on the seabed, it was sitting on the chest of every scientist in the room, making it hard to breathe. The silence from the abyss wasn't empty anymore. It was full of the deafening sound of everything they thought they knew. Shattering. And the worst part? They had no idea what came next. The only certainty was the cold, hard truth. They were utterly, completely, out of their depth. Not in the ocean, but in reality itself. The workday was long over. Now, they were just waiting, hearts pounding, for the universe to decide if it would let them go home. The coffee tasted like ash. Nobody drank it anymore. The Nautilus 2 and the new deep-sea lab, Abyss Station, hung in the crushing dark, like scared birds near a sleeping dragon. News had leaked. Not the slow drip of official channels, but the frantic buzz of satellite phones and encrypted messages. The whole world knew something impossible sat on the ocean floor. Governments called it a potential security concern. News sites screamed, "Alien artifact found." Scientists just stared at their impossible data, feeling sick. Inside Abyss Station, the air felt thick enough to choke on. The lead scientist, the one who'd whispered, quantum locked. Hadn't slept in days. Her eyes were red. Her hands shook slightly when she reached for a water bottle. She kept replaying the sensor feeds. The frozen drone arm. The dead pods. The light vanishing. It wasn't just strange. It felt alive in its silence, like it was watching back. She tried explaining to the UN liaison, a man sweating in his stiff uniform despite the station's chill. "It's not ignoring us," she said, her voice raw. "It's enforcing its state. Like a force field made of nothingness. Get too close, and you stop being measurable too. You stop being." The liaison wiped his brow. "So, it's dangerous? Dangerous?" She let out a shaky laugh that wasn't funny. "It's like walking up to a brick wall you can't see. You don't know it's there until your nose is broken. We broke the drones. What happens if a person gets too close?" That's when the military guys arrived. Not in person. They stayed safely aboard a surface ship, but their voices crackled over the comms, sharp and impatient. They wanted answers. Now, was it a weapon? Could it be controlled? Could it be taken? The scientist felt a cold dread. They didn't understand. This wasn't a tool to be grabbed. It was a fundamental error in reality. Trying to grab it was like trying to grab smoke with your bare hands. You'd just end up with nothing. Or worse. Then came the worst part. A commander. Tough. Experienced. The kind of person who dived deeper than anyone. Volunteered. She didn't say much, just nodded when they asked if she understood the risks. Her eyes, though, were wide, not with fear, but with that terrible, burning need to know. She climbed into the Mantis, a small, agile sub built for close work. The crew watched her go on the monitors, the bright lights of the Mantis shrinking into the blackness like a firefly. Someone whispered a prayer. Someone else just stared, frozen. The descent was normal. Too normal. The Mantis approached the silent shape. The smooth, dark hull filled the camera feed. The commander's voice came through, calm but tight. "Getting close. 50 meters. Systems stable." Then, the feed started glitching. Not static. Weird, impossible glitches. The compass spun wildly. Thruster indicators showed full reverse when she was moving forward. Life support readouts flickered between normal and critical in seconds. Her voice crackled, strained. "Something's wrong with the controls. Feels like time is slipping. Closer. 40 meters. 30. The smooth darkness seemed to pulse, not with light, but with a kind of wrongness. The commander gasped. "There's ripples. Like heat. Haze. But cold. Cold light. Not light. Non-light." Her voice dissolved into a burst of static. On the main screen, the Mantis's lights suddenly flared, impossibly bright for a split second. A light that didn't illuminate anything, just was, then vanished. Completely. No explosion. No debris. Just gone. Like someone had erased it from the video feed. Silence. The kind of silence that rings in your ears. The control room in Abyss Station was utterly still. People stopped breathing. Someone dropped a headset. The clack made everyone jump. The lead scientist felt like she'd been punched in the gut. She stared at the empty patch of black water on the screen where the Mantis had been. Gone. Not destroyed. Unmade. Swallowed by the quantum lock. Just like the drones. Just like the sensor pods. But this time, it was a person. A person who'd smiled and shared her coffee an hour ago. Up on the surface ships, panic erupted. Military channels exploded. Hostile action. Weapons test. Retaliate. The UN liaison's voice was frantic over the comms, ordering all non-essential personnel back to the surface. But it was too late for the feeling. The world wasn't just curious anymore. It was terrified. And terrified people with weapons do stupid things. Back in Abyss Station, the scientist sat slumped in her chair, staring at the empty screen. The cold dread had turned to icy horror. It was reacting. The quantum lock wasn't passive. It was a defense. A perfect, silent defense that didn't shoot lasers. It just unmade whatever threatened its fragile, impossible state. The commander hadn't been attacked. She'd just ceased to exist as something the universe could track. Was she dead? Or was she frozen somewhere, trapped in that silent, lightless state forever? The thought was worse than death. It made her stomach churn. The military voices got louder, angrier. They demanded action. Send another probe. Something tougher, the scientist finally snapped. She grabbed the comms mic, her voice hoarse but cutting through the noise. No! Don't you understand? Every probe we send dies. Every person who gets close vanishes. It's not ignoring us. It's killing us. By making us stop being real. What part of quantum lock don't you get? It's not a weapon you can point. It is the weapon. Its very existence is the danger. Her outburst hung in the air. Even the military channels went quiet for a moment. Then a new voice came on. Calmer, older. The head of the UN Science Committee. Doctor, confirm. Is there any way to interact with it safely? Any at all? Doctor. 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 She looked at the dead sensor feeds, at the empty space where the mantis vanished. She thought of the commander's wide, curious eyes. No, she whispered, the word tasting like dirt. There's no safe way. There's no way. We broke the rules by looking too hard. And the universe, it broke us back. The silence that followed was heavier than the ocean above them. The military guys stopped shouting about retaliation. They started talking in low, urgent tones about containment and threat assessment. But the scientist saw the truth in their eyes, even over the video feed. They were scared, not of an alien invader, but of something that made their biggest bombs look like toys. Something that didn't fight. It just was. And that being erased you. Back on the Nautilus 2, a young technician who'd worked with the commander sat in a corner, hugging her knees. She wasn't crying. She was just empty, staring at the commander's half-finished coffee mug still sitting on the console. Cold, forgotten, like the mission, like the commander herself. The routine mapping job felt like a lifetime ago. Now, they weren't scientists exploring the deep. They were witnesses to an execution. An execution carried out not with violence, but with perfect, silent indifference. The lead scientist walked to the porthole of Abyss Station. Outside, only blackness. But she felt it. The silent shape down there. Project Achilles. It wasn't a shield. It was a tombstone. A tombstone for the commander, for the drones, for the sensor pods, for everyone who got too close to the edge of what humans could understand. And the worst part? It wasn't angry. It wasn't evil. It was just there, doing what it did, existing in a way that shattered the world they knew. She rested her forehead against the cold glass. The crushing pressure outside the station suddenly felt like the weight of the entire universe pressing down on her. They'd come to map the ocean floor. Instead, they'd found the edge of reality. And someone had just fallen off. The coffee cup sat on the console, a tiny monument to normalcy that would never exist again. The silence wasn't just outside anymore. It was inside, all of them. A silence filled with the echo of a voice, vanishing into static. And the terrifying question, what happens if it decides to move? The workday wasn't over. The nightmare had just begun. And nobody knew how to wake up. The only sound was the frantic beating of hearts, all wondering the same thing. Who's next? The ocean floor wasn't just deep anymore. It was a grave. And they were standing on the edge, too scared to look down, too scared to look away. The coffee machine finally sputtered and died. Nobody noticed. The air in the Nautilus 2 control room tasted like burnt wires and fear. Since the commander vanished, the world above had gone crazy. News feeds on secondary screens showed panicked headlines. Oceanic threat. Military standoff. Is it alive? Lunic. OCE. Is it alive? Military ships now crowded the surface. Dark shapes cutting through the waves like sharks. Their voices crackled over the comms. Sharp, demanding, impatient. We need answers now, one admiral barked. Is it armed? Can we take it? What is it? Inside Abyss Station, the lead scientist felt like she was drowning on dry land. She hadn't slept. Her hands wouldn't stop trembling. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the commander's face. Calm 1 second, gone the next. The military didn't care about the science. They only saw a weapon. A silent, impossible weapon sitting on the ocean floor. And weapons, in their minds, were meant to be controlled or destroyed. Then came the order. Quiet, but final. The USS Vigilant, a state-of-the-art stealth submarine, was moving into position. Not to observe. To act. Its mission: deploy an experimental quantum pulse. A crude attempt to shatter the quantum lock, to force the silent shape into a state they could understand, could measure, could maybe even control. The scientist heard the order over the comms and felt her stomach drop. It was suicide. For the Vigilant, and for anyone near it. She grabbed the mic, her voice raw with panic. You can't! You saw what happened to the Mantis! This isn't a shield you can punch through. It's reality itself breaking. You'll just get them killed too. Silence on the other end. Then the cold, calm voice of the operation commander. Orders are orders. Doctor. Stand down. Maintain observation only. The line went dead. She slammed her fist on the console, a useless burst of anger. Observation. They were about to poke a sleeping giant with a stick, and she was forced to just watch. The Vigilant approached slowly, its own sensors straining against the silent shape. On the main screen in Abyss Station, they watched its progress. The sub's lights cut through the black water, illuminating the smooth, dark hull of the anomaly. Project Achilles. It looked utterly peaceful, harmless, even, just sitting there. The scientist knew better. It wasn't peaceful. It was waiting, and the Vigilant was walking right into its trap. Distance closing. 200 meters. A technician reported, voice tight. 150 meters. The Vigilant systems started reporting strange glitches, minor at first. Navigation drift. Slight power fluctuations. The kind of things you'd expect near an unknown energy source. 100 meters. The glitches intensified. Thrusters stuttered. Internal lights flickered. The comms channel filled with the sub's crew's tense voices, trying to calm each other down. It's messing with us, one voice said, trying to sound brave. Just interference. Stay steady. 50 meters. The Vigilant hovered, a dark shadow against the impossible void of the warship's hull. The water around it began to change. It wasn't bubbling. It wasn't freezing. It looked wrong. Like the water itself was losing its definition, becoming blurry, indistinct, as if the very idea of water was fading near the anomaly. Particles of silt didn't fall. They just hung, suspended in mid-motion, like dust in a sunbeam that had forgotten how to move. Deploying pulse sequence. the Vigilance captain announced. His voice was steady, but the scientist heard the tremor underneath. He knew. They all knew. A low hum vibrated through the comms, the pulse generator powering up. The screen showed a faint, shimmering wave of energy rippling out from the Vigilant, heading straight for the silent shape. It hit. For a single, impossible heartbeat, everything stopped. The shimmering pulse froze inches from the dark hull. Then, the anomaly rippled, not like water. Like reality itself had been a still pond, and a stone had been dropped in. The smooth, dark surface of the warship waved, distorted. The impossible void seemed to breathe. And for that one fleeting moment, less than the blink of an eye, the sensors saw. Not just the hull. Inside, the feed exploded with data. A colossal energy signature. Not fire, not radiation, but something deeper, wilder, like the raw hum of the universe itself. And within the warship structure, vast, glowing channels, pulsing with impossible light, like veins of starlight. And there, deep in the core, integrated seamlessly with the glowing structure, a shape, human-shaped, utterly still, eyes open, unblinking, not a pilot in a ship, a pilot as the ship, part of it, quantum locked with it. The scientist gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. A person, trapped, or become. The horror of it hit her like a physical blow. This wasn't just a machine. It was a person, fused with technology beyond imagining, holding the whole impossible structure together in its silent, frozen state. Then, just as suddenly, the ripple vanished. The dark, smooth hull snapped back into place. Perfect. Silent. Utterly impenetrable. But it wasn't over. The Vigilance comms erupted in pure, unfiltered terror. What was that? What did we see? Alarms blared. Not the sub's usual warnings, but frantic, overlapping screams from the crew. Systems failing. All systems. Gravity's gone. I can't feel the deck. The feed showed chaos inside the sub. Crew members floating. Not because of zero-G, but because the concept of down had vanished for them. Lights flickered between existence and nothingness. Metal bulkheads seemed to waver, losing their solidity. Then, the external cameras showed it. Not an explosion. Starting from the point closest to the anomaly, the Vigilant simply stopped being. Not crumbling, not melting. It dissolved into pure, featureless static on the screens. Like a TV losing its signal, but for an entire submarine. The static spread rapidly. A wave of pure nothingness consuming the sub. 1 second, the dark shape of the Vigilant was there. The next, the water where it had been was just empty, perfectly clear. No debris, no bubbles, no sign anything had ever existed there. Not even a ripple. Silence. The kind of silence that feels like your ears are bleeding. The control room in Abyss Station was frozen. People stared at the empty patch of water on the main screen, the same patch where the Mantis had vanished. Now, where a 150-person submarine had just ceased to exist, utterly, completely, without a trace. The young technician who'd known the commander started sobbing quietly, silently, her shoulders shaking. An older engineer sat slumped in his chair, staring blankly at his dead console, whispering, "Gone. All gone. Just gone." The lead scientist felt cold all the way to her bones. It wasn't anger. It wasn't even fear anymore. It was a deep, hollow shame. They had poked the bear, and the bear hadn't roared. It had just erased them, like they were a mistake on a chalkboard. The military comms were chaos, shouts, denials, demands for confirmation. Report. Vigilant, report. Only static answered. The panic was real, raw, and terrifying. This wasn't a weapon they could counter. This was something that didn't fight fair. It didn't shoot. It just unmade you from the universe's record book. The scientist finally found her voice. It came out a broken whisper, but she made sure the comms were live. "Do you see now?" she said, the words scraping her throat. "Do you finally see? It's not a weapon to be used. It is the weapon. Its silence is the danger. Its very being is the threat. You don't control it. You don't destroy it. You don't touch it. Because if you do..." She gestured weakly at the empty screen. The frantic military voices on the comms died down, not because they agreed, but because they had no choice. The evidence was staring them in the face. Or rather, wasn't staring them in the face. There was nothing to see. The Vigilant was just gone. Like it had never been. Back on the Nautilus II, someone finally broke the silence. "What? What was that shape we saw? Inside? The person?" The scientist closed her eyes. The image was burned into her mind. The still, open eyes. The seamless integration with the glowing structure. "I don't know. I don't know," she admitted, her voice hollow. "Crew? Prisoner? Part of the machine itself? Maybe the ship is the person, or the person is the ship. Quantum locked together, holding back, whatever that energy is." She shuddered. "We weren't looking at a warship. We were looking at a tomb. A tomb for a human being, holding back something. Cosmic." The coffee machine's dead sputter seemed loud in the new silence. The world above was screaming for action, for retaliation, for answers. But down here, in the crushing dark, there were no answers. Only a terrible, crushing certainty. They had crossed a line. They had touched something that existed outside the rules. And the price wasn't blood or fire. It was unbeing. The silent shape on the seabed wasn't evil. It wasn't even hostile. It was just other. So fundamentally other that human existence couldn't survive near it without unraveling. The scientist walked to the porthole. Outside, only black water. But she felt the presence of Project Achilles, miles below. It wasn't a threat. It was a warning. A silent, perfect monument to the terrifying truth. Some doors shouldn't be opened. Some knowledge was too heavy for human minds to carry. And the most advanced thing in the universe wasn't a bomb or a laser. It was the quiet, absolute certainty that you could be erased from existence without anyone ever hearing you scream. The ocean floor wasn't just deep. It was the edge of everything. And they just watched two groups of people step off it. Into nothing. The only sound left was the slow, steady drip of cold sweat down her temple. And the frantic, helpless beating of her own heart. The work was done. The only thing left was the silence. And the fear. So much fear. The coffee machine finally gave up for good. Just a sad little click and silence. Nobody tried to fix it. Up on the surface, the world was screaming. News channels ran non-stop. Frantic anchors, shaky phone footage of military ships circling the area, scientists arguing on split screens. "Is Earth under attack?" One headline flashed. "Humanity's greatest threat or gift?" screamed another. Down in the Nautilus II and Abyss Station, though, it was quiet. The kind of quiet that sits heavy in your chest after a storm, a quiet full of ghosts. The lead scientist sat alone in the Abyss Station lab. Her eyes felt like sandpaper. She hadn't slept since watching the Vigilant vanish. Not really vanish. Unmade. Like it had never been. The memory played on loop. The ripple across the dark hull. The impossible glimpse inside. The glowing channels, the human shape fused with the ship, those open, unblinking eyes. The pilot. That's what the world was calling it now. A name that felt too small, too ordinary, for something so terrifyingly strange. Was it alive? Trapped? Was it even human anymore? Or something else? The questions gnawed at her, keeping sleep away. Up on the surface, the shouting had finally stopped. Not because anyone agreed, but because the empty patch of water on the sonar screen said everything. 2 submarines, 1 commander, 150 sailors. Gone. Not dead. Unreal. The UN Security Council had met in emergency session. The footage of the Vigilant's disappearance, that wave of nothingness consuming it, had played on a loop. No one argued about weapons or retaliation anymore. The raw, silent horror on the faces of the world leaders said it all. You don't fight something that erases you from existence. You don't even think about fighting it. The order came down, sharp and final. Quantum preservation zone. A 5-mile radius around the silent shape was now off limits. No ships, no drones, no probes. Not even a speck of dust could be sent down there. Violators faced global sanctions. The strongest kind, meaning no country would trade with them. It wasn't a victory. It was a surrender. A recognition that humanity had stumbled into a room it wasn't meant to enter and had to back out slowly, quietly, hoping the door didn't slam shut behind them. Inside the Nautilus II, the crew moved like sleepwalkers. The mapping mission was over. The deep-sea survey was forgotten. Now, they were just guards, watching the edge of the unknown. One young technician, the one who'd known the vanished commander, spent hours staring at the main screen, showing the silent shape. Not with anger, but with a deep, quiet sadness. He'd brought down the commander's favorite mug, chipped, bright blue, and placed it on the console. A tiny, useless memorial. She just wanted to see. Far, he whispered once, so quietly only the scientist heard. Just to get a little closer. The words hung in the air, heavy with regret. The scientist knew the feeling. That burning need to know. It had driven her into physics, into the deep ocean. But now it felt like a death wish. She pulled up the data again. The gravimetric readings, the dead sensor feeds, the fleeting image of the pilot. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. Part of her still screamed to try something, to find a tiny loophole, a way to understand. But the memory of the Vigilant dissolving stopped her cold. Unmaking. Not destruction. Erasure. The ultimate price for curiosity. She thought about the scientists back in universities and labs worldwide. They weren't celebrating a discovery. They were grieving. Grieving the physics they thought they knew. Textbooks felt suddenly flimsy, like children's stories. The rules they'd built careers on, gravity, light, matter, were revealed as just the edges of a much bigger picture. A picture they couldn't even see yet. One researcher, interviewed on a news clip, had summed it up perfectly, her voice breaking. We spent our lives mapping the coastline. We just found out the ocean is infinite, and we have no boat. The scientist walked to the porthole. Outside, the black water pressed in, thick and silent. But she didn't just see darkness anymore. She saw the presence. Project Achilles. Not a weapon, not a ship. A boundary. A line drawn in the sand of reality that humanity wasn't ready to cross. The name she'd whispered in fear, back in part 1, Achilles, felt different now. It wasn't about a weak spot. It was about a limit. A reminder that even the strongest heroes have an edge they cannot pass. She remembered the commander's last words over the comms. There's ripples, like heat, haze, but cold, cold light. And the fleeting image of the pilot, that human shape, eyes open, part of the machine. What was it like? Was it aware? Trapped in that silent, lightless state forever? Or was it content, holding back that colossal, humming energy from spilling into the universe? The thought was unbearable. To be the lock on the door to something so vast, so powerful, that your entire existence was spent just being still? It wasn't a crew. It was a sacrifice. A single consciousness, quantum-locked, holding the line between order and whatever lay beyond their understanding. A new fear settled over her, colder than the ocean depths. What if the lock failed? What if whatever held the pilot in place, whatever kept that energy contained, just gave way? The energy signature they'd glimpsed. It wasn't fire or radiation. It felt like the raw hum of the universe itself. If that got loose, she couldn't even imagine it. Not an explosion. A rewriting. A moment where the rules changed. And everything that relied on the old rules, stars, planets, people, simply stopped making sense, became static. Like the Vigilant. Back on the surface, the world tried to move on. Stock markets stabilized. News cycles shifted to the next crisis. Politicians gave speeches about new frontiers and human resilience. But the scientists knew the truth. Nothing was the same. The deep ocean wasn't just a place on a map anymore. It was a tomb. A tomb for the commander, for the Vigilant's crew, and for humanity's innocence. The comforting idea that science could explain everything, given enough time, was shattered. Some things weren't just unknown. They were unknowable. Not because we weren't smart enough yet, but because they existed in a reality. Our brains, our tools, our very language, couldn't touch. She thought about the coffee mug on the console, cold, forgotten. That's what the world felt like now. Cold. Not empty, but changed. The warmth of certainty was gone, replaced by a constant, low hum of unease. Every time you looked at the sky, the ocean, even your own hand, a tiny voice whispered, "What don't you see? What rules are you blindly trusting that might not even apply here?" The scientist turned away from the porthole. The silent shape was still there on the screen. Project Achilles. Not a warship built to destroy enemies. A monument. A silent, perfect testament to the limits of human understanding. Its greatest power wasn't energy beams or impenetrable armor. It was its very existence. The simple, terrifying fact that it was operating on rules humanity hadn't even dreamed of, making the known universe feel small, fragile, and desperately incomplete. She picked up the chipped blue mug, the commander's mug. It felt heavy. Not with coffee, but with meaning. They couldn't study it. They couldn't touch it. They couldn't even truly fear it, because fear required understanding, and this thing defied understanding. The only thing left was respect. A deep, humbling respect for the vast, terrifying mystery of existence. And a promise, whispered to the silent shape on the screen. We'll keep our distance. We'll watch. And we'll remember the cost of forgetting that some doors should stay closed. The workday wasn't over. It had just changed. They weren't explorers anymore. They were keepers of a secret, guardians of a boundary. Their job wasn't to find answers, but to make sure no one else made the same mistake. To sit in the crushing dark, watching the edge of everything, and remember the silence. Not the silence of nothingness, but the silence of the universe holding its breath, waiting. The coffee was cold. The ocean was deep. And the most advanced thing humanity had ever found wasn't a machine. It was the quiet, crushing weight of knowing how little we truly know. The only sound left was the slow, steady beat of a heart. Finally understanding it stands on the edge of an abyss that has no bottom. And learning, painfully, to be still.